if I can get 100% of my money back, it's a home run. That's what ended up happening. I did a cash out refinance, actually put 30 grand in my pocket, so I'm at infinite returns. We're estimating for the complete bill to be 1.7 million, end up getting it appraised at 2.3. If we could build under the 1.7 and roll the land into it, we're in it for nothing.
Plus you make the cash flow. So it's like you can either sell it and make 1.5 million, or you just have like a good little money printer. I recently dropped a video where I featured my student Janis, who turned one single A-frame into a multi-million-dollar micro resort. And that video is absolutely crushing, coming in at over 100,000 views at the time of the recording of this video. But we all know that the real story isn't the what, it's the how. And I will say that y'all made that abundantly clear. All right, and y'all made that abundantly clear in the comments by asking how, Rob? We need more deets on how she actually pulled this off. Well, y'all asked for the blueprint, and today we are delivering. And the gatekeeping ends, because today I'm giving you the raw tapes, the entire uncut interview that I had with Janis, where she lays out her entire playbook, covering things like how she got an infinite return on her very first A-frame build, and how she walked away with $30,000 cash in her pocket, and the land hacking secret that she used to turn a $111,000 parcel into a $33,000 parcel almost instantly. Honestly, that was a pro move, and I'm really excited for you to implement that strategy yourself. And lastly, the commercial valuation strategy that she's using to turn a $2 million project into a $3.5 million asset. If you've ever wondered what one good deal can really do for your life, the answer's in this interview. And really fast, before we get into it, a quick thank you to today's sponsor, Baselane, but a little bit more on them later. Let's do this. We're back. Okay, so Janis, you have a very inspirational Airbnb property. It's this beautiful A-frame, and the photos that I just saw of it recently were very enchanting, kind of the sunlight, there's snow, there's a couple out front. What was your initial inspiration for building an A-frame?
You, Rob. You were the inspiration.
Oh,
And
thank you. Very nice.
that's actually the answer, because when I saw your first episode of, I think it was Casa Conejo, and I was like, I want to do that. And it was at the height of COVID. And I immediately like rushed out to find land. And it all, I mean, it sounds silly to say, but then it like all fell into place. After I watched your videos, I felt more confident going into it. Like, hey, you know, this is very feasible. And I do have a real estate background. I come from the long-term rental world, and, you know, just doing the comping was somewhat easy to me. And so I'm like, hey, this is like the way I bought the land and the way that I was able to comp the market. I like, if I just underwrite it based on long-term rental rates, that's going to be my fallback. And then I get to enjoy this property. I think that's just kind of how everything fell into place. It did take a year and a half to build, but you know what? I found the land. I actually got the idea from Den Outdoors when I saw their advertisement on Dwell. I'm like, again, it's coming together. This is my dream. This is what I want to do. And then when I saw your video, I was just like, this is doable.
That's really cool. Well, I was not expecting you to say me. So what? Very heartwarming. I love to hear it. Has that property panned out from a financial standpoint? Like, is it grossing? Is it underperforming, overperforming? Is it kind of right where you underwrote the initial construction?
Well, when I underwrote it, I was like, okay, based on market comps, if I have to leave 25%, because I actually paid out of pocket for this. I didn't go get a construction loan, because speed of construction and speed to certificate of occupancy was my goal here. And so when I underwrote it, I'm like, when I go and do a cash out refinance, I'm prepared to leave 25% into this, like any other
Sure. Like
rental
a typical
property.
burr. Yeah.
Correct. And so when I went to go refinance it, I was doing some of the comping myself, and I was like, okay, well, if I can get 100% of my money back, it's a home run. And
Sure.
that's what ended up happening. I did a cash out refinance, actually put 30 grand in my pocket. So I'm at infinite returns. Right now, as it stands, when I launched in 2022, September of 2022, I'm almost at, I'm just shy of 200,000 in gross income
For since you've launched it in
since
2022.
I've launched it September of 2022. So on average, let's see, on average, I would say I'm about 70 to 80,000 annually in gross
Okay.
income.
Hey, really fast, when you go from building one cabin to scaling and building multiple cabins, your entire mindset has to shift. Because you're not just a host anymore, you're a business owner. And if you want to scale like a pro business owner, then your finances have to scale with you. Which is why I'm excited to talk about today's sponsor, Baselane. I use Baselane, and I like Baselane because Baselane takes all the admin work off your plate, so you can focus on growing faster. It's literally got everything in one place. Smart banking with unlimited virtual bank accounts and up to 3.35% APY, AI-powered bookkeeping, rent collection on autopilot, and real-time cash flow tracking. So whether you're managing one unit or plan on building multiple units or a micro resort like Janis, Baselane was built to scale with you. No more jumping between apps or digging through spreadsheets, just clean, intuitive tools that help you save hours every single month and help you grow your rental business the smart way. It's free to sign up, it's easy to use, and it's made for real estate investors like you and me. I did that backwards, like you and me. So if you're ready to level up, go check out Baselane in the link down below. And when you use that link down below, you'll get a little sign up bonus. So go check out Baselane. Okay, back to the video. And what are your expenses run on just one single A-frame?
My expenses without mortgage,
All in, yeah. Like, what do you think your overall operating expenses
net,
for mortgage?
I'm netting about 20 grand a year.
Nice. Okay, cool. So you
Yeah.
got $30,000 out on the refi. You do 70 to 80,000 a year. You have roughly 50,000 or so in expenses, and then you get a little paycheck from the equity on the cash out, but you make about $20,000 give or take every
Mhm.
single year.
Mhm. Yeah.
Seems like a slam dunk to me, especially if you got all your equity back plus some. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah, so I basically have none of my own money in this build.
I like to refer to this as like a free house, and everyone's like, "Well, it's not free. Not
That's
free
I
for the
like that.
mortgage."
I like
But
that.
I think if you can get your money back out on a cash out refi, and you have no money in the deal, it's free enough. I mean, I know it's not like free and clear, but to me, I'm like, it's as good as you're gonna get in the real estate world.
Expenses are covered, mortgage is covered, and I have no down payment. Let's put it that way.
Sure. So tell me, what was the moment that you felt you could take this idea and scale it beyond just one cabin?
I've always studied the commercial real estate market and I'm like, what niche can I get into? And I've looked at multifamily, I've looked at self-storage, all of the things, office space, and this seemed a little bit more feasible to me because, you know, I feel like I need to have some identify with a property. I want to like love what I'm doing and I want, there's a design aspect to this with other types of commercial real estate, like self-storage. I'm like, how can I get into self-storage? But it's like, how can you differentiate a self-storage property besides the location? And, I think with this jumping from a short-term rental into a multiple into scale. When I say scale, I'm referring to something along the lines of, 7 units, 10 units on one property seems more feasible to jump into than something like a 30 unit property. And so, just to be able to build something from the ground up, you get more control over that asset. Because I've looked at it, you look at, existing maybe mom and pop motels, and you can put a stamp on it, but there's something to be said about you get something from inception to vertical, and you see it through. That just, there's a little bit more meaning behind it for me.
Really cool. Yeah, I feel like you're living that journey that everybody does, where they're like, "Well, I've done it once. Can I do it many times over, all at once, versus just
Hmm.
building one at a time?" Because I'm sure you've realized now that building 7 is probably the same amount of work as building 10 or 12, but still a lot. Probably the same amount of work as building like one or two at a time.
Yeah.
So
Well, the numbers get really meaningful at that level beyond 3, 4. And so I think that maybe knowing what I know now, it's like I can tell you what like some of the roadblocks are, but it just seemed very doable once I was like, hey, I comp this out. Why can't I do it at scale?
yeah. So tell me, like, what is the actual vision? Because you're building somewhat of a micro resort or like a landscape hotel, and you want to do 7 units, I believe is what you told me before the podcast. What's your vision for all this?
So this is 7 units on 1 acre, which that's it seems like it's a lot, but it's no different than what you consider like a motor lodge,
Mhm.
where they have a lot more on 1 acre. Um, and this is kind of, where went about it when I was looking for land. I kind of worked backwards. I looked at the zoning map, and I was basically able to go zero in on a specific area and go, this particular zoning will allow for these types of uses. And the uses included motel, campground, I forget what else, hotel. And so I thought, okay, let's grab this piece of land, even though it's 1 acre. Um, I'm going to have an easier time getting my use approved. And so, that's how I was like, this is going to be the path of least resistance. Um, there were big lessons in it because it's only 1 acre, but that kind of helped me over the initial hurdle of, wow, this is going to be difficult to do, especially in Colorado. So, we're we wanted to build more than 7, but there were just a lot of constraints that we had to deal with. And this is part of the reason why sometimes it's just harder to build from the ground up, is that um, you don't necessarily, every single piece of property has its own constraints, and you have to punch a hole in the wall, Rob, and
Mhm.
learn along the way, and deal with those constraints.
Yeah, and so yeah, speaking of, you mentioned Colorado. Where is your A frame now, and the initial one that you built, and what made you choose that location to begin with?
Hey, really fast, if today's masterclass and blueprint on how to actually go out and build your dream is something that's got the wheels turning in your head, but you're asking yourself, how do I even get started? Then you should consider joining the Host Camp community. That's my community of thousands of hosts that are out there doing things like this every single day. When you get into this world, you'll very quickly realize that it's not just about what you know, but it's also about who you know. You have to put yourself in the same room and community with other people that have your goals, because it will actually push you and keep the momentum going. Cool thing is you'll get access to my community and forums where you can ask me questions. You can even ask Janis questions. You'll get access to all my courses, plus a group coaching call with me, and you get access to a ton of discounts and promos and resources that make this community worth its weight in gold. The best part is you can join today for $1. I wanted to make this a no-brainer, so for $1, you can tap into my brain, my community, and grow. All right, that link is in the description down below. Back to the video.
For the A-frame,
Yeah.
that was very came from more of a selfish place, because again, we were in COVID, and I was like, I want to be more remote, and have horses. So it was like, okay, I want to find a piece of land that I can bring my horses to. I want somewhat remote, but I want some, small town feel within about 15 minutes. And so, again, with the land where my A-frame was on, it's about what are my opportunities. And with this particular parcel, it was actually 12 acres, and owned by the same person, but 2 parcels. Before this piece of land sat for probably over a year. And what I ended up understanding was that I could easily sell this off, one of the parcels off, and then lower my land costs, my land basis. So there's a lot, when you're doing your due diligence, um, that was my number one thing, or what are my options when I'm looking at land? What are my exit options, or what are my opportunities?
Got it. Okay. And so how did you discover the land for the new micro resort?
I was just looking on the MLS and just reverse engineering, looking at the zoning district maps and going, okay, if I'm specifically looking for this zone, which would allow for multiple units, which would, or, there's a lot of different, they roll up into an overarching district. And so sometimes that's agriculture. So it depends on your municipality. Sometimes you have to read those standards within that municipality and go, okay, these are permitted by use. I'm going to only filter my search by this particular use. They're color coded on the map, and then I just zone in and I either go, oh, this is that particular zone. It's use by right, and go about it that way.
Wow. Yeah. So was there ever a moment in which you contemplated building your micro resort on the same land as your already existing and successful A-frame?
I did contemplate at least another structure.
Hmm.
It's not off the table, but with that, where my A-frame is, it would be more of what's allowed, probably something
Got it.
under an ADU type of
I see.
situation, because then you would have to go into the conditional and the public hearing and all of that if I were to go into trying to build multiple units.
Oh, I see. So you would have been more open to it, but the kind of mass development was not necessarily an easy thing to do on that land.
Right. It wasn't conducive because I had already had my septic installed, and that was a big lesson. I didn't I only had the septic for the A-frame, designed for the A-frame. Knowing what I know now, I probably would have wanted to over engineer so that I could add something on,
Sure.
like an ADU. So now I'm constrained with the A-frame because they're going to say, well, your septic doesn't, um, is not engineered for another bedroom or what have you. So I would technically have to build another septic system for that ADU.
Now, are both of these like your existing A-frame and your upcoming micro resort? Are they in the same city slash market?
No, the A-frame is in a market that is, I would say, a good 30 minutes from a ski resort, a good 45 minutes to Rocky Mountain National Forest. So it is slightly remote. Where my micro resort, we're within 15 minutes of a small ski resort, where minutes within a ton of hiking trails and what we have here in Colorado called 14ers, which is crazy level hiking. But and also we have like world class fly fishing and rafting. So it's a very different demographic. People are coming to this particular area of Colorado. It's called Salida, and there's just a lot more to do. So it's
Yeah.
your traveler is going to be completely different than the one that goes to the A-frame, which is in Kremling, Colorado, and they want a little bit more remoteness and they kind of stay put for the weekend.
Got it. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What are the tourism or the demand trends for this market? But it seems for your micro resort, it's very heavily sort of that ski in, ski out, outdoorsy type of crowd. They're there for some sort of adventure. Is that
Yeah,
kind of the sum it up?
100%. Yeah. And then even within where the micro resort is, we are probably, I want to say we're about an hour to an hour and a half to the sand dunes, which is another national park. But, it's just more suited for people who are like in it for a really packed weekend.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And when you were sort of like examining this market and looking at the competition, because obviously we look at the comps to determine, hey, is this an investable area? Were there any underwhelming Airbnbs that made you think I can do better, or were there any Airbnbs at all
For Salida, is that?
for the micro resort?
I mean, in every market, there seems to be a glut of underwhelming Airbnbs,
Yeah.
and even you know, micro resorts. It's just not something that you can find. You know, you want to make it. I mean, part of what we're doing is incorporating a wellness factor into this. We're going to have personal saunas and a cool plunge as well. So we're kind of trying to hit that adventure traveler. And so as far there wasn't any that I could see anyone in this market offering that. You know, they might check the box of, yeah, this looks like kind of a hip roadside motel. Might be definitely there's cool Airbnbs in the area. But what we're finding is that, you know, traveling is a shared experience. And, you know, even though we're only on 1 acre, it's not going to be this like, you know, tucked in the woods or whatever. We're going to hit that, the traveler who are like, okay, we're going to come here and we're going to experience this, but we do still want our amenities. We want to be able to come back and, you know, just hang out, and we want to come back to a nice small micro cabin, which is what these are. These aren't full fledged, you know, big cabins. They're 480 square feet, but it's like everything you need and nothing you don't.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really cool. So there's some good stuff out there, but not necessarily great. Sounds like you're going for great out there, which is really really cool. Tell me a little bit about the overall concept for the micro resort. Are you going with all A frames, or are you looking to mix it up?
They're I they're not like your typical A-frames. They're going to be like more of a Scandinavian type of high pitch type of structure. So the A-frames, they're just, you know, I guess they're not spatially what we
Yeah.
wanted to achieve.
Yeah. I'm
So
dealing with that right
we
now, so I
do
get it.
we yeah, we do need the four walls. And so because these are very small, in the sense of that they're standalone units, we wanted to maximize our unit economics as far as like square footage goes, and they're going to be bigger than your typical hotel room. And we wanted to make sure that there was sleeping areas, because people wake up at different times, and some people want to sleep in when they're on vacation as well. And so it was very important to have separate sleeping areas, and then, you know, an area that you can, for people who are um, early risers, that they can come and chill in this like living space where, you know, for coffee and whatever else. There's 5 units that are standard cabins that have 2 sleeping areas, so bedrooms we'll call it, and then there's one with just one sleeping area and a full kitchen, and then the seventh one is an ADA accessible unit. And we thought that that was kind of important because, you know, hey, why not, right? Like, just to have it completely inclusive.
Oh, nice. That's great because I really don't see a lot of people doing that these days. That's very considerate of you, and I think that that will end up being a profitable decision in the long run. One thing I wanted to ask was, you know, obviously you had an A frame, and I was going to ask, did that influence sort of the decision to go non A frame? It kind of sounds like it did. Like it seems like you enjoyed having the A frame for the aesthetic of it, but spatially speaking, it's something you don't necessarily want to do again.
Well, not for the footprint that we needed. And so, you know, one of the constraints with, again, the one acre property is that we're maximizing number of units. And so these cabins are 20 by 24. And when you, A-frames are cool, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah,
you know,
of course.
you do lose square footage. And so it wasn't conducive for what we were trying to do here. And, you know, we looked at every type of, you know, we looked at prefab units, and those were just, you know, your looking at, 10 feet wide, maybe 12 feet wide, but super long. And it just wasn't conducive for this particular property because it was only on 1 acre and odd shaped. So, and that's just, the problem solving that you would have to do for something that's on a small parcel like that.
That makes sense. So I know you talked about doing the sauna. You talked about some of the other cool features. Are there any other unique touches or experiences that you're building into the new micro resort that would set it apart from the typical short-term rental in your area? Or would those kind of encapsulate some of the main aspects of kind of the differentiation?
I think design plays a huge part in differentiation. It's not a tangible piece, and you can't really even assign value. The only way
Yeah.
to assign
Hard.
value is your ADR. And I think that you kind of have to go with your gut, and you look at what's on the market. If a majority of what's on the market short term, and even your competitive hotels, is that's going to really just be a huge differentiator, because people do want to enjoy where they're staying, and they're willing to pay more. They're willing to pay more for that experience, and you can't really put a finger on it, but design definitely does sell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's intangible, but once the money starts rolling in, it becomes pretty dang tangible, and it's pretty clear what that it drives a higher ADR, which for anyone listening at home, that's average daily rate. Okay, well that makes a lot of sense to me. Let's talk a little bit about sort of the financials and permitting. I want to go back to the A-frame first, since that's your origin story, and we'll kind of expand it out from there. But tell me a little bit about the cost to build your initial A-frame. Do you remember those numbers off the top of your head?
Oh, you're gonna try to make me remember this. I believe my price per square foot for the A-frame was $350, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken.
And how many square feet is that A-frame?
Oh, you're gonna dig. Oh, gosh.
Really digging in here, asking the hard
I
questions.
think I want to say it's just over 1,200 square feet.
So roughly speaking, we are looking at a build cost of $420,000, give or
Yes.
take. Yeah.
Yes.
Nice. So then you refied out, and I take it if you got $30,000 out at the end of it, then it must have appraised for a lot more than 420, maybe like
Correct.
500, something like that.
Yeah, I want to say it was around like 560.
Nice. Okay. Very cool. Can you give a ballpark, speaking of digging into the numbers, of what you estimate it's going to cost to build out your 7-unit micro resort?
Well, we are estimating for the complete build to be 1.7 million.
Okay.
It's interesting because we did have a hard time getting it appraised, because there's nothing like it in the market. And so we did end up getting it appraised at 2.3. So the loan to value terms, we end up with 1.7 for build costs. And the idea here is, again, the BRRRR strategy is let's try to build this under budget, and see if we could basically roll up the land once we have to go to permanent financing. So keep in mind that 2.3 million, right? If we could build under the 1.7 and roll the land into it, we're in it for nothing. Yeah, so then we would get permanent financing, and 2.3 is our basically the lower band of what we can get it financed for, because the appraisal is good for a year. And so at where it sits right now, we have 18 months to build, but we're projecting to finish it by May, which is next month. It's a tall order, but
Oh my
we
goodness.
built we broke ground in September, October.
Whoa, that's really fast. So you're building this in September, October, November, December, January. I guess I could have just asked you. February, March. April. So like 9 months, you'll have.
C of O. I want C of O by end of May. Ideally, we would have a soft launch in June, which is
Oh
our
my
high
God,
season.
that
And
is that's
so,
crazy. Your
yeah.
June is going to be the worst June of your life and the best June of your
Well, I
life.
know, right? And so my thought process is this. We have the construction loan for 18 months. Should we finish and get C of O and launch in June, we have basically 6 months to keep paying on the construction loan, which is interest only, right? And then start our track record for income and get a trailing six going,
Yeah.
and and or look for permanent financing during that time. Again, at the end of our construction, we could opt to get permanent financing at that point and start shopping for it, which, having 6 months to be able to shop for it gives us a good advantage.
Yes. Although most lenders are typically looking for like a year of stabilization, aren't they?
They are, but when it's a construction loan and it's built, there's already a value assigned there. The value is basically the appraisal that we got during our
Right. Okay.
financing stage. So, I
So
mean, it can
what
only
is
go up from there, right? It's going to hinge on interest rates. And, we go in with a conservative cap rate. And if they are looking at future income as well, that's going to also give us a little bit more, I guess, banks are going to look favorably at that, because it's income that's already, we're booking income that's already, the banks are looking at that as
right?
like part of your future DSCR.
So when they appraised your kind of concept, did they appraise it based on what the real estate would be worth, or did they appraise it based on?
Yeah, that was the challenge. So they went in with a blended, and they looked at it from the standpoint of just comps, build cost, and then they did a portion of it based on income. So I don't know how ultimately we had to, who did it. It was a commercial broker who ended up doing the appraisal, and he was very well versed in this niche product, and he had to go outside of our micro market. He had to go, statewide, that's a benefit. If you can't comp something, or you can't do an appraisal on something that doesn't, it's very difficult to do
Yeah.
within a very small market.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's pretty nuts. All right. So we'll get into the financials here in a second, but I know a lot of people always want to know, like, what kind of permits or zoning did you have to go through from a process standpoint? Like, was it straightforward? Was it a nightmare? Was it?
It
I mean,
wasn't straightforward, for sure.
okay.
Use by right doesn't mean like they automatically grant you, you turn over a set of plans and they go, here's your permit. When you do build multiple units, typically anything past three or four, then you're going into more of this commercial territory. And when you're in commercial territory, the building codes are completely different.
Yeah.
And I always tell people who ask, I said, you have to look at your standards per municipality. Don't plant any seed or use any type of verbiage. You have to try to keep it a gray area, because when we initially were going at this, we called it a glamp ground. I'm like, we're going to go into a campground use. And that kind of just planted this seed, and we had to fight against it once we
Yeah.
figured out.
The taboo nature of the connotation.
Right, because under the campground use, there was cabins. But these cabins, once we figured out, they were very primitive type of cabins, think like KOA,
Hmm.
with no running water, one light source, and one electric source. And I'm like, that's just not going to fly for what I want to build. I want to have full amenities. I need a shower and bathroom in every unit. I potentially want, a station for coffee. And so that just kind of stuck with planning and zoning. I'm like, forget I ever said that. We're not going with a campground use. And so it really took a lot of convincing to say, we want 7 to 8 cabins here. We're going to have to go into a motel use. So, again, then you're kind of opening up this crazy can of worms of motel. Well, this isn't like your typical motel with shared walls. And there was just like certain blind spots that we encountered, which, we were able to work around. But just know that there's a lot of convincing and a lot of gray area that you can
Sure.
convince planning and zoning that, this is this, because they ultimately want to put you in a box. And so you have to help them find the appropriate box to put you in, which makes everybody happy. So,
Yeah. Permitting is rarely an easy peasy process.
right.
There are some people that we've worked with in the program that have had just a crazy easy experience, but I think most people are probably in your camp, is my guess.
Yeah, well, Colorado is going to be the one of the toughest areas to build in. There's definitely areas that really don't care. Um, but yeah, I guess I'm better for it. And, I scoff at people who have a very easy time, and they're like, oh yeah, we could build 20 if we wanted to. So, I guess that should be my next target market.
I know, right? Yeah, but that means that your competition is probably going to be fairly
Very
low
true.
for a while.
Very true.
So it's some good and some bad. It ages you a bit, but it also secures the wealth in a way that I think most people don't realize after having gone through what you've gone through. So kudos to you on that. Once you started kind of building this out and you got through that permitting process, did any of the shared infrastructure, like the septic, the roads, the utilities, did any of that scale across multiple units and kind of become cheaper? Or is it still just like one big old fat expense? Is 7 units enough of I guess a build amount for there to be efficiencies of scale?
Yes and no. I'll say yes for 7 on 7 for 1 acre.
Okay.
Here's why.
So yeah, tell me.
Had a well, which is one of the things that attracted me to this particular property, because we didn't have a well. Usually wells are a big unknown, right? Because you can drill 500 feet and not hit anything. So this was already built in there. I knew that I could get water at this location. But when you already have a well drilled, you have your setbacks around that well. And then with 1 acre, you have to have a special septic system because you don't have a couple of acres to spread your leach field in.
Right.
So it was just a very specially engineered septic system that took up a lot of the real estate on this land. And so it literally was like shrinking. The build area was shrinking on us with the setback from the well and the setback. You can't put your septic within whatever, the setback of your well. You don't want that, leaching into the water or whatever else. And so, septic was very, very expensive. But, I will say that scale is always going to help. So my learning lesson is like, look for something that's at least 2 to 3 acres if you're starting out and you want to build something along the lines of 5 to 10 cabins or units.
That makes sense, to give yourself room for, I guess, some of these alternative
Right.
septic systems, or I guess, yeah, the ability to maybe space things out a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's pretty good. I think that's the nugget right there of the show. Go 2 to 3 acres over 1. I can see how someone would kind of get into it though. Like it's like 1 acre. I'm sure it's fairly inexpensive. It's like, hey, it's 1 acre. It's good. But as you kind of get into it, there's obviously a lot that you learn in that process. And so you've gotten through this process. You're close. You're 1 month out. Do you happen to know what your projected income is for the 7 units once your micro resort is built out?
I always go at it conservatively.
Good.
So I'm just, if I'm going at it from the perspective of, let's just say 70% occupancy and an ADR of 275, that's per cabin. I maybe 66, 70,000 gross income. So times seven. So that's the magic. It's the multiple. What's the multiple? And then if you play around with those numbers, even if you leave it at 70% occupancy, but then you're pushing up towards 300, it's just like such easy math and you're not doing anything extra besides, and that's why we wanted to go from us, one A-frame to what can we build that's 5 plus.
Yeah. So if numbers are correct, you said 66,700 per unit times 7 units. You'd be looking at $466,900. Is that kind of in that range that you had in
Gross
mind?
income, yeah.
Gross income. And then do you know what your debt will be on your $1.7 million loan? I know it depends on interest rates, but I
Depends
think
on interest. So, depends on what rates are, and depends what terms are. But if we're going, just like, let's just go at it like at conventional terms. If
yeah,
my
7.5% is what I'm getting right now for the
really
development that I'm
see,
buying.
I
Yeah.
underwrite it at like 8.5.
Good. You should, yeah, that's good. You'll have a happy day if you can get less, right?
Right. And so 153,000 for my debt service. Does that sound right? Somewhere around that
Yeah.
ballpark.
For about 1.7 million. Yeah. I interestingly, I think the metric that's going to matter the most here is the NOI. So let's remove debt service from it. Do you know what your other expenses are going to be? Like, have you gotten into the nitty gritty of like, hey, I think I'll be at a 50% NOI, or do you have those numbers kind of calculated yet?
I typically will do my expenses at
Mhm.
40%. And I do plan to have a cleaning fee because my competition, they have cleaning fees. And so that will offset what I consider probably a majority of what my expenses are, which is cleaning and laundry. So that'll help, which then, it's for the most part a
Mhm.
pass through. So that's not incorporated into my ADR of
Sure.
275.
So that's interesting. So if you're saying that your expenses will be 40%, if I'm doing this correctly, then your NOI, if it's 60%, is $280,000, and that's before debt service. But what's interesting is, I don't know what things are trading for in Salida, but typically an 8 cap seems to be appropriate for this type of development. So quick math
Mm-hmm.
here, $280,000 NOI at an 8 cap is a $3.5 million valuation. That's back of the napkin. That's very, very fast. But,
Right, right. And that's kind of how you have to go about it. And so what is that? $1 million in forced equity.
well, it's more. I mean, if you're at 1.7,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's call it 2 million after all your holding costs and everything. Yeah,
Right.
1.5 million. Not bad. Plus, you make the cash flow. So it's like you can either sell
Mm-hmm.
it and make 1.5 million, or you just have like a good little money printer for as long as you want. I mean, that sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Right.
So how are you looking at this from a like a long-term value of the resort? Do you think that this is kind of a business, or do you think of this more as a real estate asset?
Well, I always look at it from the point of view, it's kind of both,
Hmm.
right? Um, if you look at how hotels are operated, there's two entities. There's a propco and an opco. I could sell the business and keep the property and lease it out, right? And so there's all, again, going back to what are my opportunities, what are my exits, and I could exit as like, let's just sell the whole thing, the property, everything, or I could sell the business portion and keep maybe the rental income from this as my future cash flow. I don't know. It just depends what is presented to me. But this is basically a stepping stone to another project that I have coming up. That's it, not too far away, probably about 30 minutes on 40 acres. And so again, this is like I do love what this represents and having a hand in designing and bringing this to life. But this next project is going to be something bigger and probably closer to my heart, which is more of like, I would say it's based in agritourism. It's going to have an event space. It's going to have more of like just more experiential aspect to it. Because this particular property in Salida, I don't, I, because of the scale and, some people might think that seven is a lot, but on 1 acre, I'm not able to cater to the experiential piece of it, like more of a hands-on type of experiential piece to it when you don't have a lot of land to deal with.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, don't forget to call me on that one. Let me raise for you. I can raise the funds.
Yeah, this will be an interesting one because it is also in an opportunity zone. So, every
Oh,
time we're doing something, it's like we're going to level up to something like bigger and better and just, again, back to the different opportunities.
yeah, yeah. So tell me, what's the hardest part about building your first unit? Like, what's something you can tell someone
Oh God,
to keep in
looking
mind?
looking back to build just one on one property is the easiest thing to do.
Okay, so it's
Like
actually not so bad. So the hard part
it's
is what?
not
Getting
so
started?
bad. It's not so bad because you can buy land and you can build a single family residence, right? It's that is true use by right. That is simple. You bring in plans to get approved. They can't necessarily deny you. I mean, you're not going to go in and into commercial land and build a house, but if you're looking at just, your typical land in a forested area or whatever, it's that's going to be one of the easiest permitting processes that you're going to go through. Now, you're going to still have to do your due diligence with access, septic, water, electricity, all of that, but that just comes with the territory of building.
It's kind of when people have kids and then they have their first kid and they're like, "Oh, having kids are so hard. It's tough." And then I'm like, "Yeah, the second kid's a lot harder." I'm like, when we had our first kid, we're like, "Oh my gosh, we couldn't get on planes or anything." And then we had our second kid, and I was like, "Dude, life was so easy with one
Right?
kid. Like it was not hard. It's like once you start adding more to it, it gets exponentially harder. And then I don't know this, but I'm told that once you have your third kid, it's like no big deal at all. So I feel like development's probably that way, where it's like 1 is easy, 2 to 10 is like probably exponentially harder, but then 10 to 30 is probably like easier in a lot of ways because you got
Right.
the efficiencies of scale.
Yep. Yeah, I think once you get over the 10 hump, that's what you're doing, it's like it's the same work at that point.
Yes. So I guess last question I'll ask you, and maybe you've already answered it, but just for everyone at home, if you could start over, if you had to start over, what would you do differently?
Gosh, it sounds so cliche, but I wouldn't do anything differently because you have to go through just the learning of the unless you have a good mentor, Rob, that and a group. I've been in Rob's group for I don't know how long has it been, Rob. So I was like one of
Years.
what do you call them? The co-founders, not the co-founders,
Oh, you
the
were a founding member.
a
Yeah. So you,
founding member, yes. And
wow.
it's kind of this leapfrog situation. You learn from other people's not even mistakes, but their experiences. And that's going to help you kind of just sidestep a lot. And I think that there's people who are in this group that might not even have like a short term rental that they could dive. I mean, they could dive right into multi. And if that, I guess that would be my advice is like jump into the multi on not, just on a singular property, on a singular piece of land, jump into that, whether it's something existing or if you have like the fortitude to build something because the resources are out there. It's going to
Wow.
take more time and a little bit more, just head down, and you have to day in, day out. If even though it doesn't seem like you're making headway, I would, looking back, I think I would just jump straight into the multi unit.
I love it. Well, awesome. Well, I'm going to end this before I get too misty. But it's been such an honor to know you.
Oh,
That's all.
same here, Rob.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you've helped me tremendously. And, just sometimes there's people who are just in the background listening, and that's, just keep on showing up and keep on listening, and you're gonna get there.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time. We'll link out to your Airbnb, ask people to heart, all that good stuff. But okay, this was amazing. And that's my full breakdown with Janis. Again, huge thank you to Baselane for sponsoring today's video. And by the way, if you haven't seen the original feature video on Janis's story, then you're definitely gonna wanna go and check that out right here. This is perhaps the best video that's ever gone live on the Raw Built channel, so go check that out after, of course, you like and subscribe. All right, I'll see you over at that video.